Here's from Chris Hedges. The neocons who orchestrated the disastrous wars with Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Libya, and who were never held accountable for the profligate waste of $8 trillion taxpayer dollars. Don't try and process that number. Blood will shoot out your ears. As well as $69 billion squandered in Ukraine and counting, look set to lure us into yet another military fiasco with Iran. Iran is not Iraq. This next part could not be emphasized enough. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is not Afghanistan. Iran is not Lebanon. Iran is not Libya. Iran is not Syria. Iran is not Yemen. Iran is the 17th largest country in the world, with a landmass equivalent to that of Western Europe. It has a population of 90 million, 10 times greater than Israel. That's 10 times more soldiers than Israel has. And its military resources, I mean, if they get the babies marching, which if you listen to what Israel says, Iran's pretty powerful. They probably get the babies march, I feel like. And its military resources, as well as alliances with China and Russia. And all of this makes it a formidable opponent. This is not to understate what Israel's done so far. Israel has assassinated a great many of the military leadership in Iran in these first few days. They've clearly been infiltrating Iranian society. Mossad is all up in there, and they clearly have the ability to assassinate many Iranian leaders. And let's not forget Trump assassinated one of them during his last term, the top general Soleimani. But that is not going to cause the downfall of Iran. It might make their military abilities a little decreased, but it's not going to end Iran. Anyway, to continue from Hedges' article, they think it'll be an easy war, said Alistair Crook, a former British diplomat and member of British intelligence, MI6, and his last name is Crook, member of MI6. Appropriate. Who spent decades in the Middle East. These neocons bonded with the Israeli leadership of Netanyahu. He went on, will not tolerate any rival power, any challenge to American leadership and American greatness. They will create facts on the ground, a war between Israel and Iran that will pull Trump into a war with Iran. Israel has their playbook laid out. This part, you can mark our words that Israel, if this is not enough, if the tit for tat back and forth between Iran and Israel is not enough to get the U.S., and we're talking, when we say involved, we're talking directly involved, as in U.S. firing bombs into Iran, as opposed to the U.S. supplying bombs to Israel. There is a difference there. This is clearly a U.S.-backed war with Iran, just as anything Israel does is U.S.-backed. It is a U.S.-backed genocide in Gaza right now. But Israel clearly wants the U.S. involved directly in a hot war with Iran. That last thing I read said they will create facts on the ground. That is another way of saying false flags. Creating facts on the ground means that Israel will get at least the world, maybe not the United States, but the government, not the United States government, but a lot of the world to believe that some false flag has happened, that either Iran attacked U.S. military bases, they can find a million of these, and Israel is no stranger to false flags. People should look up the USS Liberty if you're unfamiliar with it. Back many decades ago, Israel wanted to draw the U.S. into one of their wars in the 1960s, and they attacked the USS Liberty, killing many scores of U.S. Navy seamen. And the U.S., maybe not initially, but the U.S. eventually, rather quickly, knew that it was Israel who had done it, and no ramifications. Now they're just, okay, Israel attacked us. Okay, sure, killed a lot of soldiers. Okay, cool, awesome. While Iran's air force is weak, this is back to Hedges, with many of its fighter planes decades old, it is well supplied with Russian air defense batteries, Chinese anti-ship missiles, as well as mines and coastal artillery. It can shut down the Strait of Hormuz, which is incredibly pivotal, the world's most important oil choke point that facilitates the passage of 20% of the world's oil supply. This is why oil prices are going up around the world. This would double or triple the price of oil and devastate the global economy. Iran has a large arsenal of ballistic missiles it can unleash on Israel, as well as on American military installations if they wanted to. While initial waves can be intercepted, repeated attacks would swiftly deplete the Israeli and U.S. air defense stockpiles. Iran has the ability to get through the little tofu dome that Israel has there. And Iran so far has continued to be the adult in the room. Their response has been calibrated, has been proportional, and they have not attacked U.S. bases or anything. Israel is not equipped to endure a war of attrition, such as the 8-year conflict between Iran and Iraq that ended, despite U.S. support for Saddam Hussein's regime, in a stalemate. Or, as in Israel's 18-year occupation of southern Lebanon that eventually forced it to withdraw in May 2000 after repeated losses suffered from Hezbollah. Israel cannot fight off an Iranian missile attack, said John Mearsheimer, a West Point graduate and professor in political science department at the University of Chicago. You have this very interesting situation where not only can Israel not win these wars, but they've turned them into protracted wars in which Israel is heavily dependent on the United States. Israel and its neocon allies believe they can eradicate Iran's nuclear enrichment program by force and decapitate the Iranian government to install a client regime. That this non-reality-based belief system failed in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Libya eludes them. Now, this is perhaps the only thing I disagree with in the article. I hate when people say, oh, we had these giant failures. The U.S. empire had these giant failures in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Libya, etc. Now, there are huge aspects of them that were failures, such as the amount of money dumped into Afghanistan and that we stayed there for 20 years and that the Taliban were back in power. But they would have loved to have a puppet regime, and they largely had one in Iraq for a while. But the real goal was just to make them kind of failed states without much power, which succeeded in all of them. In all of them. So this idea of, oh, look, the U.S. empire failed in Libya, it's like, no. Libya was a rather successful country. Gaddafi was doing many things that the U.S. didn't like, such as nationalizing the oil, having many socialist programs, such as free housing. But more importantly, he was going to drop the U.S. dollar. He wanted to get other African countries to join a African-based gold dinar system that would have subverted the U.S. dollar. And if he had succeeded and other African nations joined him, and then the rest of the African nations saw what a good deal it was, and they started switching, well, then the entirety of Africa would be off the petrodollar. That's fucking nightmares for the U.S. empire. That's everything that they do is based on the petrodollar, and the U.S. dollar is the global reserve currency. So they got what they wanted. They got Gaddafi bayoneted in the streets. Libya's no threat to them. Libya's back into the U.S.-controlled central banking system. Done. Massive success. You think they care if it's warlords fighting and open-air slave markets and sex trafficking and the fucking horror show in Libya right now? No! They're psychopaths. They don't care. So it's not a failure. Oh, this huge failure they had. That implies that they care about human beings that are not them. And they fucking don't. So can we please stop saying they failed in all these countries? Israel, at the same time, wants to divert world attention from its genocide and mass starvation in Gaza and the accelerated ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. The Israelis understand that if you have a general conflagration, which means giant war that's fucking awful and kills thousands, if not millions, people will not be paying much attention to the Palestinians. And so far that's been true, hasn't it? Since the moment Israel started bombing Iran several days ago, how much you heard about Gaza? How much you heard about Palestinians? Almost nothing. And there wasn't enough before that anyway. Iranian attacks would eventually leave hundreds, then thousands dead. Iran will appeal to Shiite Muslims for the region. This is another key point that I haven't heard talked about almost at all. To the region in what the Iranian leadership will describe as a war against Shiism, the second largest branch of Islam. Saudi Arabia, which condemned the attacks on Iran, has 2 million Shiites who live in the oil-rich eastern province. The Shiite-dominated government in Baghdad will side with Iran. Yemen will continue to disrupt maritime traffic and hit Israel with drone attacks. Hezbollah, however crippled, will renew attacks on northern Israel. The United States has pushed China, and here's another important point. All of this is pushing our so-called enemies together, which we seem to be getting quite good at. Biden, Trump, first Trump, doesn't matter. They've all been awesome at pushing other countries to join together and start working together to stop the unhinged, bloodthirsty lunatics that is the U.S. Israeli empire. The United States has pushed China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran very close together. They form a tight-knit bloc. Largely as a result of the Ukraine war, the Russians and the Chinese have been driven together. And given what's happening in the Middle East, the Iranians and the Russians have been drawn together as well. The United States may be helping Israel, but it's important to understand that the Russians are helping Iran. It's not to America's advantage to have China and Russia aligned closely against Washington. It's not in America's interest to have Russia and Iran working together against Israel and the United States. The generals, politicians, intelligence service neocons, weapons contractors, and so-called experts, celebrity pundits, and Israeli lobbyists are not about to take the blame for 2 decades of military fiascos. Yet again, I think it's true that they want to dump this off on someone else, but are they really fiascos? Or did the U.S. empire get what they wanted? To continue, he says they need a scapegoat. It's Iran. The humiliating defeats in Afghanistan and Iraq. Yeah, I shouldn't even read this because I disagree that they're defeats. I do agree there's a lot of humiliation around them. You know, the humiliation of how fucking catastrophic Afghanistan was, the amount of money dumped into it, the amount of people who died, and then just to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. It's kind of humiliating, but I think still largely achieves what the U.S. wants to achieve and Israel.